Hello and welcome to another edition of the Connection Diaries. I'm joined by my lovely and intelligent and insightful colleague, Kel Delaney. And this month we're talking about accountability, which is thrown around a lot these days, and it seems almost even more so. Kel, what are you thinking about in the world of accountability? Why do you think this matters right now?
Well, I guess for me, and Emma Rose and I had this conversation a while ago, and it's sort of evolved. We hear accountability from our clients all the time. We need more accountability. We want more accountability. We need to build in more accountability. And it made me wonder, what does that even mean? What are people thinking when they say we need more accountability? I know Emma Rose did a little research. I did a little research on, well, what's the history of this term? What does it actually mean, and where does it come from? And I guess what we'd like to sort of talk through a little bit today are some ideas around how we might redefine accountability. The more we've discussed it, the more I'm seeing, I think there are different circumstances that require a different form of accountability. And that, to be honest, when most people are saying we need more accountability, they're applying a form of accountability that doesn't match the needs, the purposes, the outcomes they're trying to meet or accomplish. So I wonder, Emma Rose, maybe you want to just share a little bit about your research into what accountability came out of, what the history is and the context.
Sure. Yeah. So we like words at Conversant. And so I wanted to look into the etymology and how was this used? Where did it emerge from? And it really does come from a Latin root that, it means to count, but kind of evolved into to hold someone to account, mostly for monies owed, property owed, things like that. So for one, it really was quantitative in nature. And then another point is that there was a lot of a punitive air about it. It's quite fear-based if you think about it. Think about the history of people calling on people for their debts and then what the consequences were for that. And so what was holding people accountable was this fear of punishment, which I think is interesting to at least be aware of, that that's where it came from. Not that necessarily it's true in all the contexts we apply it today, but another place I thought about this recently was, I think it was in the news, that Amazon has this time off task metric that they use for particularly their factory workers. And they measure, just, I guess, based on cell phones and things like that, when they step away from whatever they're supposed to be doing, and that there are consequences for you having too high of a time off track metric. So these things are being used in certain contexts, but like Kel said, that might serve some better than others. The other thing we talked about is that it seems this concept of playing in uncertainty, unpredictability, that's big right now. We've been talking about it for the last number of years, but especially over the last year with COVID and everything. And that it sounds almost like the accountability stuff is increasing as a means to try and secure some certainty. Like, how do I guarantee some sort of outcome? But clearly, as Kel, you might want to talk about this now, but that might not be actually the solution that we're looking for.
Yeah, for sure. I think, historically, over the past century or so, even probably before that, we were in a world where most of our work, most of our factories, most of what organizations and corporations and businesses were doing was more predictable, more certain, more stable. You could create processes that followed a certain recipe or a certain path. You could set milestones. You could, as long as you followed that path correctly, you knew what you would get by when and what quantity. And so accountability made sense, and it works really well. And it's really a form of efficiency. And most of our success over the past century and the successful organizations have done that really well. And I would argue that they're still doing it really well. But the problems of today, most people or a lot of organizations are now struggling with, where I think there's a mismatch, are unpredictable, rapidly changing. They're very uncertain. We don't have all the information in order to outcompete these new startups or competitors, we actually have to not just incrementally improve, we need to come up with new ideas that surprise people and our customers. And that old form of accountability, that efficiency mindset, that just closes the gap. So we can apply that, but all it's doing is improving the processes that already exist. We're already doing it so well, I would argue there's not much room for improvement in that. It's tiny and very incremental. It's not going to outcompete the people who are innovative or doing something totally new and fresh. And so, yes, I think that way of looking at accountability and efficiency is still relevant, but applies to those circumstances where there's a clear process, there's a lot of certainty and predictability. An expert can come in and give us tips and tricks and ways to fix it. But if you're dealing with unstable, rapidly changing circumstances where you're trying to innovate, for example, it's just not going to work. That constricts. What you need to do is the opposite. You need to expand into more and more creative means. And the way we sort of define that with Conversant are there's three elements that really create innovation and allow human beings to thrive in their work. And that's community, contribution, and choice. So with community, you welcome in as many perspectives as possible. What you're doing here this is a diversity of perspective. You're collecting as many eyes and ears and life circumstances and perspectives on things as you possibly can into the community, into that conversation. But diversity without trust, safety, doesn't go anywhere. So that's the next element, which is contribution. You want to create an environment where people have trust of one another, where people feel safe to contribute and to fully offer what they have, and communication to facilitate those connections. If you can do that, now you have community and contribution. That's where the clash of these different perspectives and ideas come together and reveal new possibilities, things that just didn't exist before. That is the heart of innovation. And as you can see, if you think about that, that's very different from tightening up the control or trying to make things more efficient or hold people to timelines. That's sort of the opposite. And the last element, that choice, is autonomy. It's allowing people the freedom and flexibility to do something with that. When you put people in these communities and they come up with new ideas, the new ideas are based on assumptions, but then you need to go out and test them to see, were we correct in our assumptions? Will this actually work in our market? Will our customers be excited about this idea? Or is it just we're excited about this idea? How can we iterate these new, fresh ideas? And so it's important to allow a choice, to allow the community of people who've come together to also define who's going to do what, how they're going to do it, what are the little experiments or prototyping that they're going to do. I think most people are now familiar, you've heard a lot about the future of distributed and autonomous networks. This is really tackling that challenge in organizations. It's the ability for people to self-organize and make things happen in a way that a traditional hierarchy might not be able to, in a space where that's needed. And that doesn't mean a free-for-all at all. There are still constraints. And I think we've all heard the creativity thrives with constraint. And that for us, we define with purpose, outcomes, and then the container in which we have to work. If people, that community of contributors are very clear and aligned around the purpose they're in together, the outcomes they're striving for together, and then they have choice within that, that's where the creativity, the innovation thrives. And so the way I've been thinking about accountability and redefining accountability is using community, contribution, and choice as a way to form, measure, and create accountability in a world in challenges that are unpredictable and rapidly changing, where we don't have all the information. And we, in most cases, wish to innovate. Like I said before, that doesn't mean there's no room for the way we've traditionally defined accountability. I actually think it's just as important. What's even more important, though, is to be able to stop and identify, is the challenge we're tackling right now one of efficiency and predictability? If it is, we go with the way we've thought about accountability for a century. If it's unpredictable, rapidly changing, and uncertain, we go with this new form of accountability, where it's very human-centered and grounded in community, contribution, and choice.
Well, I love that. I mean, obviously, because I really like how you think about these things, but I really love that human connection is at the center of that. That as things get more unpredictable, more uncertain, likely more frustrating, you have to be in it longer and be in a state of wonder, which is another word we love to throw around. But that comes from being in really high quality, high connected, um, really well communicating relationships within your organization. So
Yeah, and that brings up, I think, another really important point. If you think about it, the traditional accountability forms of work are rapidly being taken over by automation and artificial intelligence. That is the realm that artificial intelligence and automation works best in. So that's really a dying end of the spectrum. If you really want to compete and grow into the future, you need to be on this other side, at least partially. And that's where the human element is crucial. And the human element needs freedom and creativity with constraint. Once again, community contribution and choice is what creates that.
sounds like we have the answer.
We'll
Not
see
quite,
about that.
but somewhere on the way. Well, this is just one of those questions that we had and we decided to explore together. We wonder what you thought might have in terms of thoughts on this topic. Please let us know. We're always eager to learn and hear new perspectives. And if there's questions that you have about the world of work or organizations today, we'd be happy to explore them. So please send them our way as well. Thanks for joining us once again, and we'll see you next month. Thank you, Kel.
Thank you.